going to start by learning a little bit more about Heads Up, how and why it came to be. But before we do that, I know some of you might be wondering about the transition from Ascend to Heads Up. Lisa Strandberg, our executive director, is also on the call. So Lisa, would you mind sharing about that transition for us?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Lisa here. I am going to share just a little bit of history. I don't want to steal any of the thunder of Heads Up because Heads Up existed before the partnership with Pillars. Um, Back in 2016, Pillars had a number of properties donated by Lynn Cummings Keller. Those properties included 16 units of housing and a commercial building in southwestern Neenah, right at the edge of the city. And the idea was to launch a program serving young adults who struggled with their mental health. Lynn had a vision for the program that a number of the housing units, 10 in fact, would generate income just by serving as housing units to support programming in the other 6 units for young adults who struggled with their mental health. That program was launched with those assets and also with support from the Basic Needs Giving Partnership and other funders. And it was launched initially in partnership with NAMI Fox Valley. Rachel Youngquist, would you say hello so everyone can see your face?
Hello.
There she is. Um, Rachel was the team member who oversaw the launch of that program. And that program existed for several years until just about a year and a half ago when we began winding it down. The reason for that wind down, reasons were several. Our partnership with NAMI Fox Valley had ended, and we were providing mental health support on our own, despite the fact that mental health support is not explicitly our mission. We also, many of you are aware, struggled with structural deficit in our budget a couple of years ago, so needed to look for ways to be sustainable as an organization. We decided to approach that by looking for opportunities not to end programs completely, but to reimagine programs if possible. And Ascend presented an opportunity for that. So we gathered a number of stakeholders in the community, county representatives, other nonprofit leaders, executive directors who were at the table when the program was launched. Rachel was in the room. I was in the room. Laura was in the room, Laura Keel, board president for Heads Up. And we began to see some overlap between the population that we were serving in the Ascend program and the population that Heads Up Fox Cities was serving. It wasn't perfect overlap. That was one of the struggles for us. It was, if you picture a Venn diagram, partial overlap of the population that we were serving. Heads Up at that time, they'll tell you more about this, was nestled in with another organization, didn't have a space of its own, but had a great vision for that commercial space that was donated to be used as a community center to serve all of their program participants, not just those who live in what is now their transitional housing program. So through time, we wound our Ascend program down and deepened our partnership with Heads Up Fox Cities. And we have been operating under an informal MOU for 1 year, just over a year now, and are making strides to formalize that MOU in the next month or so. So I'm going to leave it at that. Other than that, I'm just very proud of the work that we've done together. Change is not easy. Transition is not easy. Winding down a program that you were very proud of is not easy. I want to especially applaud Rachel Youngquist for staying at the table and moving through that process with grace, with commitment, with dedication to the shared mission of our organizations and the shared need to house young adults who are at risk of homelessness. So I am going to stop there. I'm going to pass the ball back to Megan to take us where we go next.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Lisa. So now I will hand it over to our guests to introduce themselves a bit more, and then we'll jump into the interview. Feel free to drop questions in the chat at any time. It is being monitored. So Laura, Sarah, I'll let one of you take it away for the minute.
First in the pictures, so I can introduce myself first. Laura Keel, I'm the board president and also the founder of Heads Up Fox Cities. I think we'll kind of let everyone introduce themselves and we'll circle back to the story of Heads Up and how we got to be here. But I'm just grateful to be here this morning, and also just want to quickly echo Lisa and the gift that Rachel has given us by being part of this, and just helping us learn more about the Ascend program and how we can run ours in some similar capacities. Your turn, Sarah.
Oh, good. I'm Sarah Brown. I'm the new executive director with Heads Up. And when I say new, I am just barely into my first month. So I think here in a couple days will be month 1 for me. So if I'm going rogue during anything or I'm speaking about things that just don't make sense, Laura and Beth, just turn your audio off and start coughing so I can get on track.
I'm Beth. I'm the director of operations at Heads Up. I actually interviewed to be a life skills coordinator, and when they met me, they realized that my talents would be amplifying the organization as the director of operations, and it's been amazing ever since.
Thank you everyone for sharing. So before we jump into all of our questions this morning, we all know that November is Youth Homelessness Awareness Month. Do you want to share a little bit more about the research behind that?
All right, so just some research. So the overall societal cost of removing youth to foster care is significantly negative. So to kind of put in perspective, for every dollar spent on foster care, the government and taxpayers incur an additional $3.84. And so bringing this to light really underscores the reality that a lot of our participants are already entering the program, carrying a pretty substantial societal burden. Young people aging out of foster care have a significantly higher risk of homelessness compared to the rest of the general young adult population in the United States. So kind of putting that a little more in perspective. So nationally, 11 to 36% of young people aging out of foster care experience homelessness compared to just 4% of their peers. And in Wisconsin, just in Wisconsin, about 1 in 5 Wisconsin youth who aged out of foster care will become homeless after turning 18. Right now, more than 90% of our participants here at Heads Up are entering the program either unhoused or with unstable housing. And obviously not having that basic need met, there's that brings on other numerous barriers, including, no credit history, no rental history, pretty minimal job experience, and really just this underlying need to continue to develop essential skills, skills just, as simple as budgeting and allocating their resources and knowing when and how to pay for things. And then and we'll talk about this a little bit more as we talk about some of the challenges that we see, but one of the biggest challenges right now is transportation. So very few of our participants have their driver's license, mostly because foster youth in general rarely receive the driver's education or aren't able to afford having that driver's education. And even fewer, if they were able to do that, have access to be able to purchase or have a way to get a car. And then just all of these factors, right, are already challenging, not to mention, right, the housing market, landlords already having dozens of applicants that they're having to go through to be able to select tenants for their future. And also just a couple of other numbers to throw in there, just again, to really put into perspective, nationally, 20,000 to 25,000 youth age out of foster care without a permanent family each year. And in Wisconsin in 2024, there was 278 youth who aged out, meaning exited out of home care by aging out from the system. So that number is high. It's high nationally. It continues to be high in the state of Wisconsin, and that number hasn't really decreased. I was looking at some numbers over the past 5 years in Wisconsin alone, and that number is not going down.
Thank you for sharing all of that to kind of give some context to the importance of the work that you guys are doing. So now we can go into the history of Heads Up and how and why it started.
Thank you. So I guess one of the pieces of this is just kind of pointing back to what Sarah's saying. And there's very little data on those who are experiencing child welfare and then are not adopted or aging out. So there's a whole nother piece of this population that we're able to serve that either haven't been completely removed or, haven't aged out, they went home. So there's more, which is kind of the idea behind what we were thinking with Heads Up. So I was a foster youth, and my experience in foster care was very challenging. From there, I went home. So there was no study behind what I would experience, but much like folks who have aged out of the system, I went through a series of life challenges, from substance use, mental health, being unhoused, teen pregnancy, domestic violence, right? The list kept going on. And I was someone with no driver's license. I was someone with no support system. I didn't have a job. I dropped out of high school. So where I started was an extremely challenging place that we see a lot of our participants coming in, that those circumstances have really put them down at a much more challenging place to start. So we decided to do foster care. I, over time got my bachelor's degree, got involved in a much healthier relationship, amazing husband, had some more kids, but then ultimately wanted to use what I had experienced to be impactful for someone else experiencing similar things. And in our heads, we were thinking, oh, we're going to, take a kid in, we're going to save this kid by giving them a different house than the ones I experienced. And we quickly learned that's not how it works. There's a lot of trauma involved in removals and spending time in strangers' houses, right? It smells different, it feels different, the food is different. You know that you're different. You're not the same as the rest of the family. And it's hard. It is very hard to be in foster care, no matter how well-intended your family might be. There's also some systemic challenges that I think we could talk about all day long that increase some of the stress and challenge that comes along with being in foster care. So as we were kind of falling in love with some of the kids that had come into our house and realizing we're actually not here to save them, we really start to look at what do we do for them? Because we saw these systemic barriers getting in the way of what we knew they were capable of, what we were watching them try to be capable of. And so Heads Up really started as a grieving process for me, from what I thought I knew and what I thought I was doing to what the realities of foster care were. It was also part of a healing process for me because it really put into perspective some of my own traumas, some of the things that I had experienced, and kind of shifting the burden away from myself and really starting to grow in that. So we started this as my grieving process. And before I understood how hard it was going to be to build a nonprofit, we had already gone out into the community and shared this idea and kind of started to spark that. Are we forgetting about someone? And so there was no turning back at that point. The community had recognized the need, we recognized the need, and here we are a few years later. So that program was really started with the intention of being here for two young people that we loved very, very much. And so we built it around what we saw that they needed. And then we brought the community in and said, what are we missing? My perspective is limited. So so honored to be able to have some of those conversations, those very hard conversations with youth, with the system, with other nonprofits, with our funding groups, and just being able to learn, what do we need? So we built this around the premise that people really need supports. Everyone needs community. So our intention was, let's build in an opportunity to give them support where they're at, and then remove some of the barriers that are getting in the way. So some of those transportation barriers or barriers to education, all of those pieces that we can help advocate and help find opportunity for, and then help start building in life skills that they did not have growing up, or, even now. Things like, how do I pay my bills? What does credit mean? How do I budget? Some of them were coming in and they needed help learning how to do laundry. So being able to build on some of those skills and to see what they could do when we just get stuff out of the way and we let them do what they've always been capable of doing. So, and we were just barely a year over starting our direct service when Lisa approached me and asked me to be part of the work group that she was talking about. And it really snowballed quick, because at that point we had already seen our participants, they're coming in unhoused, and the solution to that is housing. The solution to homelessness is housing. So we were honored to be able to take part in how this has developed and how the system is changing its views on kind of that midstream service, right? We've seen harm be done, but the cycle hasn't repeated, and these people are capable of so many cool things. And so being able to partner with Pillars in that has brought just incredible opportunity for support groups and different opportunities for housing and partnerships, and just it's been a beautiful experience. So that's kind of the history of where we started.
I'm going to echo the chat and what everyone else is saying, but thank you for sharing your story, Laura. And it connects perfectly to what I wanted to ask next. So you talked about the why of the organization and that background, and now about the how. So what services or programs does Heads Up provide, and how do these meet the needs of the youth experiencing homelessness?
So I'll take this one. So like Laura said, most of the participants we see are coming in unhoused or in unstable situations. So basically we have a program inside a program. Our greater program is the direct service, and we serve youth ages 16 to 24. Housing's a little different. We, if they're 18 to 24 or legally unaccompanied minors, they are able to join the housing. Youth have to experience, obviously, the foster care system, child welfare system, or youth justice system. And when they come to us in that official contact, we always look at basic needs first, like first minute, first second, what do you need, to help kind of build that trust. We do have an open pantry at the community center, basic hygiene items, food items, where we partner with St. Joe's and community partners. So when they come in, like a lot of first time participants leave with things like soap and shampoo. So that's kind of how we begin these relationships. Everybody who joins is assigned a life skills coordinator who is their personal advocate, and they all have their own personalized path. So participants are in the driver's seat. They've probably spent most of their lives being told what to do and how to live their lives. And so we want to give them that independence. Some of the other items we offer, obviously, we have housing, independent living. We focus often on health and wellness. Transportation, as Sarah said, is a huge barrier. Safety. So like an example is we have a Thursday night group meeting where we're having a healthy relationship speaker come in to discuss, boundaries with family and friends. A lot of our participants want to finish their GEDs or move on to college. So we help them with things like navigating FAFSA, and a lot of them don't even realize they can get so much help from that. Finding employment is something our life skills coordinators are often helping with, building resumes, interview skills, things like that. And as touched on before, financial, we've been doing pretty much a monthly group meeting on financials and building credit scores and budgeting. So that's been really great. Another topic we cover with our participants is barrier relief. Something as simple as they finally get this job and they're so proud, but they can't afford work shoes. We help with things like that. And seeing their bodies relax once they realize they don't have to worry about finding work shoes it's why we do what we do. We also, like, our services are non-transactional. Basically, they are able to decide how often and how and like when we get involved. We try to let them lead. their path with gentle nudging in situations as needed. Resource navigation is another big bucket we pull from. We're growing our community partners every day. And then as far as like, we're a big goal setting organization. So like no goal is too small. Someone, finally gets a job and we want to celebrate them, so things like that, like there's little hurdles to the bigger hurdles, to graduating, to birthdays. Like we want them to know that like the work you did, no matter how big or small, is very important and we're proud of you. So we have support groups every Thursday from 4 to 7. During that time, we have community volunteers come in and cook a home-cooked meal for everybody, which, as any of you know, you've gone to college the first time, you come home that first Thanksgiving, and it's the best thing you've ever had. I'll talk more about that later. As mentioned, you guys have been briefed on the transitional housing, which again has been an amazing asset to give these young adults their own space. We had a new participant come in and he looked at us and he said, "What's the curfew?" And we were like, "You don't have one." And he just couldn't believe it. He was in shelters and he was just so excited to kind of have that autonomy over himself. And then one last piece, which again, I'll talk about later, is we have our community center with that open pantry, which is very kindly funded mostly by volunteers. So that's kind of the overview.
Do you guys have any success stories that highlight the difference that your team is making?
So I can speak to that a little bit. The one thing to note is that we don't ask them to share their stories publicly because they're theirs, and that's really the only thing they have to bargain with is their story. So what I can share is that the youth who this was for is now a part of this program, and that's relatively recent. So that is a huge success both for our community, and our program, and him specifically. But then we really like to look at success a little bit differently. So we look at success as whatever the goal they set, did they meet it? So we're constantly changing goals and we let them lead what that means. We have seen people who have come in from these extremely unstable situations or, being unhoused, being in shelters. And we've been able to access a youth voucher for them and then help them advocate through to get their own permanent housing. And just watching that transition of I'm no longer unhoused, the barrier that lifts, watching them then be able to, continue forward with advocating in their job space for either promotions or healthier boundaries at work, watching them get excited to go back to school, whether that's for their GED or getting into whatever it is they wanted to do, right? A lot of them haven't had an opportunity to look forward yet. And once they do, it's so cool to watch them decide, we've got someone who wants to be a social worker, someone who's won a lot of ribbons over at the fair, just having some of those spaces to grow and be part of it. We've seen a lot of folks who have addressed their mental health. As we know, mental health and wellness is really the backbone of a lot of some of these opportunities moving forward. So we're watching them step back and take care of themselves first. And I think one of the most incredible things that we've seen is through our program, we've had a volunteer step in who's been able to help teach some of them to drive. So we're watching folks who have come from being unhoused, some of them are in unstable relationships or unstable housing. They're coming in, they're able to access this housing program. They learn all of these basic life skills and can start to look forward. And then we're able to watch them do things like get their driver's license and stuff so they can do all of those next steps for themselves. So I don't know that that's a perfect one person success story, but there's so many and they all look so different. And we're just glad to be able to celebrate all of them.
Thank you. How do you guys measure your community impact? So whether through data, outcomes, visible changes in the community?
Yeah, I think a little bit of all of it. Of course, it looks different for us when our goals are ever changing, right? So we have data that measures they've met their own goals. And so we put that in categories. Some of the categories that Beth was speaking to, like independent living skills, transportation, health and wellness, safety, education, employment, financial, and whatever goal they have, we kind of put that in our own minds as what bucket would that fall under, whether it's big or small. We look at the success of every goal they've met. And then we, over time, look at how many goals are we seeing folks meet? And then we look at how many hours one-on-one are our life skills coordinators able to serve these young people. Our goal is authentic relationships, and those only come when you have the capacity to really build authentic relationships. And so this year alone, we're over 2,400 hours so far in direct service hours, which is just incredible. So from that, we also are looking for what kind of outcomes are we seeing as the changes in the community, as we see partners come alongside the way that Pillars has, as we're watching Levin come alongside our partnership with Appleton Housing Authority. All of those pieces speak to they've seen what kind of impact this collaborative work can do and what this authentic relationship work can do. And that really speaks to, is our program functioning in a way that is going to be successful for our community as well? So we kind of just look at a little bit of all of it, just trying to be mindful that what we think is success might be different than what someone else thinks is success, and looking for opportunities that really drive home success looks different for everyone, and it is still success.
What are the biggest needs you're seeing in the community right now for youth experiencing homelessness?
Well, hell, I have just been listening and forgot that I was even one of the presenters here today. So that's been kind of cool to be like, oh my God, you do work for this amazing organization. Okay, so biggest needs that I think we're seeing in our community. So one of the things, like we all know, right, affordable housing and a place for those to go is always going to be one of the biggest ones, like Laura talked about. We have an opportunity for our young adults to have the FYI voucher, that foster youth to independence voucher, and really figuring out how do we grow our relationships with landlords, with property managers, to kind of reframe what a good tenant looks like. That might mean having someone who has a great support system that's able to help them along their housing journey. And so I think being able to continuously figure out how do we grow that space. So we have our youth coming from transitional into more permanent options. I think just, more mental health support, right? So like Laura's talked about, like Beth has talked about, our young adults have really experienced a lot of trauma in their very short years of life. And so having that consistent mental health support with trauma-informed counseling, and that it's accessible and stable, is something that all of our young adults would absolutely benefit from. I think that transportation access that we've talked about a few different times continues to be a pretty big need for our young adults. That continued need to build trusting relationships. Many of the relationships that our young adults have had with other adults in their lives haven't always been the most stable. They haven't always been the most consistent, and have probably been let down by a lot of adults who've said that they weren't going to do something over the years. And so I think really being able, that's a big need, is that continued connection, that continued building trusting relationships. And then I think just also like the employment and the educational pathways, and figuring out how do we find employers, or how do we build relationships with employers that are flexible, that are supportive, that understand that there might be a different need out there. And so how are we meeting people again where they're at, and providing them with opportunities to continue to better themselves.
Are there any challenges that your team faces delivering services, particularly around any community stigma that there may be with youth and homelessness?
Well, I think that community stigma in general, right? I think there's a very misguided understanding of our young adults who've experienced foster care, or have experienced trauma, that they're troubled or that they are unmotivated or undeserving of things. I think this population is one of the most unseen populations. They've kind of been through systems, and then it's kind of expected that, well, you're 18, you just figure life out. And that is not the case for any 18-year-old, let alone one that has endured, again, quite a bit of trauma. And so I think there's, again, like there's the challenge with, landlord and housing bias. There's the think the challenge on the emotional toll that this work takes on staff, and the impact that this work has on all of us who are showing up, trying to constantly be advocates for our young adults, working hard to educate and reframe the community's perception of these young adults and anybody who's facing housing instability, whether you're a youth or you're someone who's 48 years old and struggling as well. And so I think, navigating that stigma from our perspective as well, right? Like, how are we continuously showing up for ourselves? I saw someone put in the chat a little bit ago when I was just sitting here listening, was, putting on your own oxygen mask so that you can take care of other people. And so how are we taking care of us so we can best show up for all of the participants in I know it Heads Up, and then also those that all of us are serving.
What do you wish more people understood about youth homelessness and the work that you do?
Oh man, so much. I guess, well, first off, that homelessness in general is very rarely a choice. Again, whether that's youth or those are adults at any phase of their life, that, it's often due to systemic gaps. It's often due to family instability, having limited safety nets, not having that. So I think being able to understand that, it's like, again, some of the stuff we taught is that Laura talked about, I think that's super, super important, is that progress looks different for everyone. And just because they have the shelter over their head, the rest of their life doesn't just come together. And so I think really understanding that sustainable outcomes comes from patience, it comes from consistency, and it really, really comes from that person-centered approach. So that personalized path that Beth talked a lot about, it doesn't just come because we've figured out that, you're in housing right now. It's still a lot of work, and that progress looks a little bit different for every person. I think the biggest thing too is that community matters, and that connection matters. And that's just from like the volunteering to the mentorship to having the community space. Just in the last month, watching our participants be able to come in and hang out on this couch, play some Switch, talk to each other, have each other to connect with, and all of our staff to be sitting right here that they can also connect with, come in, we're available to them. I think just that in general, that community is super, super important.
It's a wonderful note to end on this part of the conversation. So you mentioned community a little bit too. So how can so what are your Heads Up goals and initiatives for the future, and what role do volunteers play in that?
So speaking of community, we have a great one behind us. As I mentioned before, we do have the Thursday night meal volunteers, home cooked meals, always a win. Literally a few days before, like Tuesday, Wednesday, participants come in and they say, what are we having on Thursday? So that's amazing. Again, I mentioned in-kind donations for the pantry. We have one individual, we call her Coupon Ellen. She found us and we're so grateful. Every time she comes in, she brings the best stuff, and she always tells us how she got it basically for 25 cents. So she's been a real joy. And then from the individual, we also have a lot of corporate support as well. Like Thrivent reached out to us to do an essential items drive in early December. Plexus has helped a lot with projects around the community center. We've worked with Rebuilding Together to update the bathrooms in the units. We want our participants to understand that they don't have to live, you know, in a crappy like with a crappy bathroom. Like we want to raise that, like that quality of life. We want to instill that in them. We also have a few church groups that we've been working with a lot recently. There was one around the corner from our community center where their quilting group made a bunch of quilts for the housing units. And then they just reached out yesterday about donating some Thanksgiving baskets for members in the housing. As mentioned before, there's a lot of people who offer their time and services. So the drive time volunteer is highly sought after by our participants. We have another community member who gathers and puts together these welcome baskets anytime someone moves into the unit. So a lot of people we get have literally a bag of clothes. So to be able to give them a laundry basket with, you know, sheets, towels, Kleenexes, like basic hygiene items, like they light up because they just did not expect to have all these basic needs met. And then obviously we have some partnerships with essential, like needed services like eye doctors in the area and like therapists. So, you know, we kind of got a wide web from the individual to the corporation, but everybody's been so willing to help.
I see that Lisa raised her hand.
Yeah, it occurred to me as I was like Sarah sitting back and just sort of enjoying the presentation that I hadn't really fully painted the picture of what our partnership, like how we are in community with Heads Up as an organization. So I thought this might be a good thing to tack on to the end of what Beth shared about all the great support that they've been able to garner. We continue to use those donated assets to support programming in those 6 units. And what that means is that Rachel and her team are still very much involved. Pillars has expertise in maintaining properties. We have a maintenance staff. Heads Up is a small organization. They do not have a maintenance staff. So we are able, through the rent that we generate from the 10 units that are non-program units, to support the 6 units that are. So we maintain all of those units, including the units that Heads Up has autonomous management of. They decide who enters the housing programming. We are there to fix the plumbing when it needs fixing, address appliances when appliances need addressing, et cetera. So we continue to utilize those assets to in as close of keeping with the donor's original vision as we're able. So really sharing resources across the organization.
Before we transition into Q&A from anyone else on the call, Laura, Sarah, Beth, was there anything else you guys wanted to share?
I mean, just opportunities for involvement, right? So first, a huge shout out to Pillars. The fact that we can house these youth that are impacted by the child welfare system. We've only existed for 3 years. It's because of Pillars and the community's belief in their work. So Pillars and Heads Up are showing up, just like Lisa was saying, to show what it means to lift each other up rather than compete, especially in these current times of crisis. So I guess when I think about, you know, the future, I think about supports. And if you're supporting Pillars in any way, thank you, please do. And then if you can consider, if you have some more capacity, consider supporting Heads Up. You know, we would love to have you come volunteer with us or support us in any other way that is that you're able to.
Thank you.
I am just going to throw in there at the end of that if anyone on this call would like information or links to specific volunteer opportunities, things like that, put it in the chat because I will be sending a follow-up email. And if I know what you want, I can research it and get it in that follow-up email. So let me know if there's something you're like, ooh, I wish I had. Write it in the chat now, please.
We are now going to open it up for audience questions. So if you're, you can type your question into the chat or raise your hand. Dana already raised her hand.
Hi. Yeah, I just want to, I already threw things in the chat, but it was really wonderful to learn about your organization and your heart, vision, and vulnerability, and how you flex. I was really inspired, Laura, by how you shared you're originally going into this work thinking I'm going to fix, and I've been an educator for over 2 decades, and I get that shift of paradigm of nope, it's an offering, and we'll just be there humbly. I was really inspired by all of that. I was curious if you have any I know you work with young adults, so they're not necessarily public school aged, but I wondered, I'm guessing kind of organically some connection with local schools. It just seems like there's a natural connection there at some point. Do you have any relationship with the schools at this point, or is it more like a focus on because it's adults that are already out of the public school system?
That's a yes and. So we have relationship over at the tech with some of their programs, with Connect M1, an online program, but we are lacking more opportunity for some of these folks who have not yet gotten their high school diploma and want one. They come from a different level of challenge, but being over 18, being out of that range, already having dropped out, it adds a complicating factor. We have worked with schools when we've had folks who are still in high school at the time that they join our programs. So I would say it's a yes and. So if you have other opportunities for more or better collaboration in this community, we're always open.
No, I was just curious because I see alignment in the problems you're trying to solve across those sectors. Thank you. Can we share a little bit about like how Pillars works specifically with homeless youth, like how our process coordinates with that?
Jenny, would you like to field that question? I have some notes here from Christine, our adult and family shelter manager, but I think you're likely better equipped than I am.
Well, you might be better equipped with those notes, but I would just say, obviously, within our adult and family shelter and our adult shelter, we have youth who have experienced homelessness, who we support within those two programs. Also coordinate with the school districts, not just Appleton Area School District, but school districts, to make sure the children and the youth can continue to go to the school that they started at, so they can have that continuity. And then, we work with Heads Up. I know I think we've had at least one successful referral, Laura, and we make sure that we're connecting people with services when appropriate. But obviously both, unaccompanied youth are able to access our shelter and receive services and have case management and wraparound support to connect them with all the things, transportation and, helping them get what they need as far as the next steps. And sometimes that might not be housing the first time, but it could be connection with the resources they need that they haven't been able to access before. Obviously, housing is always the end goal, but often there are other barriers that are getting in the way that we also assist with. Did I miss anything from Christine's notes?
I was just going to you did great. Jenny is our client services director. So she oversees all of our supportive housing and crisis housing programming. When she mentioned unaccompanied youth, she's talking specifically about 17-year-olds. And we do serve 17-year-olds in our shelter who are there without a guardian. Because they're more vulnerable, they are likely to be prioritized on our wait list if that's where they find themselves. And they can't rent an apartment on their own. They're not legal adults. They can't do that. So having partnerships with organizations like Heads Up can provide a solution for them that is safer sometimes, more comfortable, that has more of the support that they need than they can find in shelter. We also do refer to Heads Up at Home Base. I went to the H drawer and I grabbed the wrong folder, to Home Base, the runaway youth and homeless program out of the Boys and Girls Club.
I'll just say one more thing. Sarah mentioned adults who had been in foster care as children. And we see that and we hear those stories at our adult shelter. And we navigate those stories with them and we navigate what they need. And a lot of times that is connection to mental health support. So we work hard with our partners to create those connections, get people connected with even just the medical care, dental care, things that they may not be connected with and may not know how to connect with, as well as jobs and opportunities like that. So we do see that. I think you said, a 48-year-old who may have experienced foster care as a youth, and we see that as well.
I do have one question from the chat to share. And I think, Beth, that you had talked about the volunteer opportunities. So this one might be for you. She asked if there are opportunities to sit, eat, and converse with your participants because they're looking for opportunities to engage with the communities and be there able to support in that manner. So for those Thursday night meal groups, is that something like that they would be able to do?
So typically, we're big about participants having their privacy given their situation. So what we would do for the Thursday night meals is we have these wonderful sliding doors that close off the kitchen or the rest of the community center. We let participants know that a volunteer will be coming in, and if they want to be in the space while they're dropping the food off, that's fine, but it's completely up to them. Typically, they do stay in the game fun communal side while the volunteers drop off the food. So it's not typical to have, sit down and have dinner with them. There are other ways, like we've had an art teacher come in and do a little class at the Thursday night group meeting. We have another person from the community who's all into car repairs coming in to teach a car basic. So like if you wanted to truly like engage with the participants, I think that would be a better avenue than the meal is obviously welcome to have the meal brought, but it's not really like a sit down and have dinner with everybody situation.
I will just say with that, in the situations where we're not asking them to interact, the times that they do, you're going to find a much more authentic group. And that's for better or worse. We've got a lot of really awesome, loud personalities. So when we give them that option and it's a day where they do feel safe with that, you are going to get the most authentic version of each one of them.
All right, I am going to take back over again because I see it is 8:27 and I want to respect the start to everyone's morning. If you have any other questions or things like that, feel free to email me at events@pillarsinc.org so that I can pass those on to Heads Up. I will send out a follow-up email as well, and I will include the contact information in case you'd like to connect with Heads Up directly. All right, now I think it's actually sharing. Had a little bit of lag, sorry there. So a few things just to let you guys know on Pillars and that are coming up. We do have our giving tree, our annual giving tree, which is we invite community members to host donation drives for us over the holiday season. If you are with an organization and you're like, hey, that sounds like a lot of fun, please make sure that you sign up. We do have all the information on our website. If you go to our website to events and look up Giving Tree, you can find out all the information about signing up to host a drive there. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions. This is our last conversation of coffee for the 2025 year. We will be reconvening back in January for the 2026 season of Conversations Over Coffee. It will be the last Thursday of the month in January, April, July, and October, so about a quarter apart. If you have any future ideas for future topics or things that you'd like us to dive into, I would love to have that feedback. We want topics that interest the community. So please make sure to share. I'll likely be getting a link to a very short survey that would likely be like, what topics do you want to see? That I'll send out to you guys as well. So it'll be easy to give me that feedback. And I know that everyone likes a good match opportunity. Stay tuned. We're not announcing details quite yet, but starting December 1st, we will have a match opportunity here at Pillars. Any match opportunities in your future over at Heads Up?
We sure do. Actually, we're kicking that off now. So with the Theda and Tamlin Clark Smith Family Foundation and Salmon Foundation together, we have a $30,000 match between now and the end of the year. So if there's some extra capacity there, this is a great time to give.
Remember, a donation to any of these organizations ends up helping all of the organizations because we do all support the same people and try to work on the same problems in the community. So everyone loves a good match opportunity. Find the one that works for you. Make sure that you are staying connected to Pillars for the most up-to-date information. Our website is the best place to go, is the hub of everything, pillarsinc.org. But we are on Instagram, YouTube. You'll get the link to this video on our YouTube site and the follow-up email, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So make sure you're staying connected with us. We love it when you interact with us on those sites. And it's 8:31. So thank you guys for joining us today. Please have an amazing rest of your day and enjoy this spooky season tomorrow.